Eto, Supersonics le ita adulate. Anada di masanji jama Gambia Bankokam, ise kodo ta nole ibe dawo da birin katon fokoina andung batatije. Hade batatije, ise kodo ta nole ka bonam bantala bankol to birin UK, Europe, USA, Canada, Switzerland, aninyin banku tumal mu beto na doku sone yata atariyata akoita andung allan na yata. Gambia Bankokam, Supersonics le dinkiral siyata katambinyin tumal mu meti. Supersonics be banku tan sabani nani la to fota findu bankol to. Dung ila Google Play Store to wala ila Apple App sign ye Supersonics la money transfer app o download. Porque ifa munafang na service hola.
Service or his representative joining us here this morning. Permanent secretaries or their representatives of various ministries who are in our midst here this morning, the Director General or his or her representative from the Department of Strategy, Policy and Delivery, Office of the President, members of the National Select Committee on Tourism, Culture, Youth and Sport, Director Generals of the Gambia Tourism Board, Gambia Tourism and Hospitality Institute, and the National Center for Arts and Culture, and staff of those agencies under us, representatives of GCCI, Tango, Gambia Hotel Association, heads of departments, representatives of Development Economic Management Project, distinguished participants and stakeholders, colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. Minister and the staff of the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, I am extremely pleased to welcome you here this morning to the launching ceremony, ushering in the formulation of a new national tourism policy and strategy for the Gambia. I wish to thank you for accepting our invitation. I'm grateful to all our stakeholders and development partners who took time from their busy schedules to attend the meeting today. It is a testimony of your interest and commitment to the tourism sector, which is also a glowing reflection of not just how important our work is, but also how seriously dedicated you all are to the growth and progress of the sector. What we are about to embark on today is a fundamental stepping stone towards the development of a renewed, up-to-date, and modern tourism and culture policy and strategy that will map out the way forward in this vital sector of our economy and seek to address the challenges and bottlenecks of our contemporary sectoral situation. Ladies and gentlemen, tourism has emerged as one of the success stories of the National Development Plan endeavors and development endeavors, and a major driver of the economy, and not only contributes immensely to employment generation, but also overall wealth generation for national development. Undoubtedly, the tourism sector has increasingly gained prominence in terms of programs and investments. Yet over the years, it has not been managed and developed in accordance with a clear-cut policy and strategy, even though a tourism policy was in place from 1995 to 2000. This has resulted in short-term ad hoc and fragmented strategies, which are reflective and uncoordinated, and have thus failed to capitalize on our diverse tourism resources and decongest over-reliance on beach-related products known as sun, sea, and sand thereby limiting the ability of the tourism sector to diversify the product base and effectively provide much needed economic support and contribute effectively to overall national development efforts. Gambia tourism must, of necessity, undergo an unprecedented paradigm shift to better serve the country, a transformation in approach embedded and steered by a dedicated policy that promotes the integrated management of tourism and by this means enhance sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, it is against this context that the need has been felt to formulate a new comprehensive national tourism policy and strategy with a view to repositioning the tourism sector to engender and sustain institutional realignment and synergy in tourism, public-private partnership, improve funding for tourism development, diversify and upgrade our tourism product, place a clear focus on tourism human resource development, enhancement of standards and overall service delivery, leveraging the use of new information technology platforms, and so on. Ladies and gentlemen, the overall purpose of the meeting is to ensure that all tourism sector stakeholders are fully briefed on the policy and strategy revision process in order to maximize their participation and strengthen ownership. The specific objectives of the meeting are to provide an overview of the rationale, objectives, and outcomes envisaged with respect to the revision of the policy and strategy, provide an overview of the methodology and process for the policy revision process, present the broad outlines of the work plan, and seek stakeholders' input into the revision process. It is anticipated that at the conclusion of the workshop, the outcomes would include a full understanding of the policy revision process, as well as an enhanced participation and ownership of the process on the part of the stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, in reiterating my ministry's pleasure in welcoming the stakeholders representing all facets of the sector, including government institutions, hotel operators, investors, tour operators, women and youth groups, and others, I urge you to take an active part in the deliberations so that we can carry out an in-depth diagnosis of the sector and collectively chart the way forward. I take this opportunity to introduce our consultant, Dr. Tijan Jalo, and his team, who are with us today, and to look forward to you all collaborating with the team in this important exercise. Finally, I am pleased to welcome our very own Honorable Minister of Tourism and Culture, Honorable Ahmad Nkeba, and honored to invite him to kindly deliver his opening remarks. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Madam Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Tourism and Culture, the representative of the head of the civil service, permanent secretaries of various ministries here present, Director General, Department of Strategic Policy and Delivery Office of the President, members of the National Assembly Select Committee on Tourism, Culture, Youth and Sports, Director Generals of the Gambia Tourism Board, GTHI and the NCAC, representatives of GCCI and Tango, Gambia Hotel Association, equipment hirers, fruit sellers, taxi drivers representative, experts, stakeholders, and all those from the tourism fraternity here present, representatives of our development partners, in whom we owe a lot of gratitude, particularly the UNDP, who are funding this very important program that we are about to embark on. We once again thank them for coming to our support. And we're looking forward to another request that is before them, and that is the tourism master plan. We're grateful to you, UNDP. Thank you very much. And again, our partners, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, and of course, the Economic Management Project. Distinguished participants, stakeholders, colleagues and friends, and indeed, our very able consultant, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, and the press for that matter, and all other protocols respectfully observed. I have a difficult task. When I am asked to read from a prepared document, you know, it's always a task for Ahmadba, but I will do my best to comply with protocols as required by this very important gathering. However, I think I'll be going through my notes whilst I'm speaking to give you other information that I think is valuable whilst we are sitting here. It is my singular honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to this important meeting, convened to formally launch the process for the revision of the National Tourism and Culture Policy and Strategy. As you know, the last such framework expired in year 2000, 2 decades ago. As such, between 2000 and the exodus of the former administration, there was no updated hard and fast tourism policy on strategy that steers the operation of this vital sector of the economy. However, a few years ago, in 2019, my ministry organized a landmark first National Tourism and Culture Conference. One of its key goals was to exchange views and lay the groundwork for the development of a new tourism and culture policy and strategy. Unfortunately, funds were not immediately forthcoming to make this dream a reality. And indeed, of course, there was another hurdle, which was, of course, COVID-19, which struck last year, as we are all aware, and we are still into it. This conference did identify many measures at the policy, strategy, and operational levels. I believe those recommendations are still valid and will definitely be considered in the policy revision and strategic development process. As I had this morning early in exchanges with the consultant, it is important that the recommendation, the outcome of the National Tourism and Culture Policy Conference be taken into full account while we are not dictating the procedure you're going to adopt in getting this done. The revision of the policy and strategy comes at a critical time with the sector reeling from the adverse socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic that has seen economics devastated globally, including our own in the Gambia. Worldwide, including the Gambia, the tourism sector has been particularly hard hit. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, at the same time, despite the crisis and through our collective efforts, we have a unique opportunity to think afresh and come out with a policy framework that will reposition the sector to not only address short-term measures to lead us out of the current crisis, but also to render the sector more competitive in the medium and long terms. This strategy rethink is being done globally by all concerned. It must be clear to all of us that competition will be fierce and tough as economic investors, operators, and other interested parties all seek to chart out new courses of action to revitalize the operation and render the business model sharper opportunities and more responsive. The Gambia should not be left behind. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, Gambia's tourism industry plays a critical role in the country's economic prosperity and growth indeed, in promoting all-inclusive culture-centered tourism. It's the fifth strategic priority of our National Development Plan 2018-2020, as reported in the fourth annual report of the implementation of the NDP. The sector surpassed many of its all annual targets for 2018, signaling a robust reboot after many years of lackluster growth. Sadly, the relaunch of the sector following many years of regression has now been dramatically curtailed. The impact of COVID-19 is widely known and indeed has been well documented in many reports. The Gambia Tourism Board, the license, the rates of almost all the hotels, amounting to almost $20 million to relieve the economic burden on some of these establishments. Gambia government went further to pay the operational license of most of the establishments during the year 2020 on behalf of this establishment. Furthermore, the government of the Gambia, again, contributed $100 million to support the sector, which no other sector received in this country. I think the only other sector that received some support was the media, which also came through our initiative, because we believe that the media are our partners, and their very existence is the support means our existence as a sector. And that support came through us. We pioneered that support, and indeed we are proud, and if need be, we'll do it again. And again, the same government have been flexible with most of the issues that were related to tourism vis-a-vis government. As of 31st December, I'm happy to announce that the government of the Gambia have paid $188,579,345 to hotels during the COVID period as at 31st December. Let me repeat, $188,579,345 were paid by government to hotels during the period of COVID. It is not in our ministry's policy to indicate who received what and who was paid what. As a government, we try to avoid that. But all what I can tell you that this is the lump sum figure that were paid to hotels as of 31st December 2020. And payments are still ongoing from January. We'll avail you that information. So these are all economic policy interventions by the government of the Gambia to support the sector. And I think, considering our economic strength, it is not a small contribution. It's a huge amount of contribution. I want to believe, to tell you the truth, some of the hotels have earned more money during COVID than they ever earned in the last 2 years or so. Yes, I can tell you this. If they go back to their balance book, balance sheet, you will see it there. But that's just said and done. There are those that did not benefit. We must also acknowledge that there are those who did not benefit from this $188 million payment. We also adjusted most of our policies, and indeed, this government has started talking about the promotion of domestic and regional tourism well before the advent of COVID, because we believe as a government that the industry crisis, you're gone to zero ground, absolutely. And we've seen it during the impasse, we've seen it during Ebola, during the SARS, and many other calamities that happened. And again, we are now witnessing it. As a result, this government thought of the policy of making sure that we promote a lot of domestic tourism and regional tourism. And I can assure you today, we are doing extremely well, beyond the expectations of many people. I went to many hotels who are almost 30% occupied. Their restaurants are full. We have now seen Gambians going out as tourists, taking their families and children, exploring their own country. And I think this is where we need to develop a strong domestic tourism policy. All the countries that came back to the market after a brief lull of COVID were those who have strong domestic tourism policy in the whole world. And I think that was the reason why we thought about this prior to COVID coming into this country. So we are now witnessing Gambians going on excursions to these hotels, visits, Gambians going out weekends in the hotels with their family and kids. And I want to appeal to hotel owners to yet still be more realistic with your pricing. I think the level of earning in the Gambia is not high. The middle class have also suffered immensely because of COVID. Those who are involved in business, their businesses have suffered. I think if you want to promote the policy, we must also visit our pricing structure to make sure that we can accommodate these Gambians and move on. As a result, the government felt also there was the need to develop the quality standard accommodation in the country. And that's why we came up with a policy of building at least 5 lodges that are of 4-star standard throughout the country to complement the private sector and also support those who are engaged in trying to build such beautiful facilities in the Gambia, particularly using the Gambia River. Where we are still suffering, we still need investment in river transport. Our Gambia River is not fully exploited, and I think experts would agree with me. This is an area that we really need a lot more investment to encourage people to be using the river in order to benefit more from our tourism, ecotourism, and of course, culture center tourism. And that's why the program that we have under the Ministry of Sports, and indeed in collaboration with the National Center for Arts and Culture, the wrestling arenas that are to be built are all to be built close to where we have these lodges, so that when people come, they have somewhere to stay. I was at a festival day before yesterday, and I realized that all the hotels in that whole region was full. People from Casamance, Southern Senegal, rather, Guinea-Bissau, other parts of Senegal and Gambia were all over. There was no room at Tendaba, there was no room at Absca, there was no room at Bintang, there was no room at Buyam. All the hotels were full. And that shows that we are moving forward. But then we must create the facilities. The services has to be there. The substandard services that are happening here, we have to do away with them. And Gambians have a right to enjoy the best food and the best accommodation when they are with their families. And I think property owners must always put this thing in their minds, that if you are serving somebody overseas, in fact, you should serve your own Gambian even better, because he is more likely to come to you with or without COVID or anything than somebody who has to fly with all the protocols of coming down to the country. And we believe that this policy is moving on. And in doing so, again, a lot more has to be invested into culture, because there is a need to explore our cultural values and heritages and maintain our cultural sites. And that's why the Tourism Ministry engaged in developing, maintaining our historic cultural site that we believe need to be done. We have just completed the Kekir Batch 1, and we are engaging the Mongo Park 1. We've finished with the plans and the bill of quantity is done. Now we are moving on to Wasu. We have been contacted by very interesting partners overseas who want to come as tourists for purely stone circles to the Gambia. And that project, we want to work with the Senegalese and, of course, Gambian stakeholders who are around to make sure that we exploit those very rich tourists who come, whose main tour holiday issue is to go where you have the stone circle. That's why we are developing those sites and then making sure that we expand in the rural Gambia and people will come from all over to visit our country. We've received a small setback regarding the 4 lodges that the United Nations under the climate change program was to be built. These lodges are still, the project was under the Ministry of Tourism. It was under the Ministry of Environment. It seems as we're praying that the hope that the project will not elapse when these things are not implemented. Our ministry have availed all its technical support to the Ministry of Environment regarding that. But I think we are in a difficult situation with that. We will still engage the Ministry of Environment as to how, because that's why I always believe that in doing projects, private partnership is important. Because once there is a private individual involved in it, at the end of the day, it shows that the project will succeed. So we will take it up with them and see what best we can do to make sure that those lodges are also built in the Gambia to enhance. And we are happy to report that too, that a Gambian will also inaugurate a new hotel in Farafenni, 4-star. And a lot of people are trying to invest really in developing the industry. With partnership and collaboration with our development partners, as I said, this is important because right now we have partners who are interested in helping and supporting our tourism policy. We've seen the support that is being extended to other countries who are now developing new tourism cities, new tourism sites. The issue of governance has always been an issue for the past government, but I think the Gambia have been rated very high when it comes to governance. And I believe that is one of the reasons that is now attracting our international partners to support the development of the sector throughout the country. And we have done all our submissions, and we are looking forward to their positive intervention in partnering with us and to move forward. Our investors, we want to say, we have got a lot of hotels that were built the last 4 years. I think over 15 new hotels were inaugurated, about to be finished, completed, of 4-star, and then most hotels have also been refurbished to a higher standard. And that shows that our partners, our people are still also have a confidence in the system. And that's why government is reforming all its policy programs to make it easier for investors to invest in the country, in all sectors. But that's why culture-centered tourism matter a lot for this government, because we cannot only continue to promote the Gambia on the 3 S's. We have to go beyond that. We have a lot more to offer. And I think experts agree on that. And that's why my discussion this morning with the consultant also centered on him trying to, and he agreed with me, there are partners that he will eventually contact to co-opt in his study to help support that concept that we have. And he is an experienced man who also knows this country very well and knows the product, because he's one of those architects of the NDP, the current National Development Plan of the Gambia. We are currently working closely with our development partners, namely the World Bank, to craft short-term measures to address recovery challenges. This ongoing work will clearly feed into the revision of the policy framework. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, apart from the need to provide a pathway out of the crisis, there is an urgent need for us to articulate a comprehensive tourism policy framework. You are aware that since the endorsement of the NTMP and the birth of the new democratic dispensation, the government of the Gambia, under the astute leadership of His Excellency President Adam Barrow, has formulated a new medium-term development strategy, the NDP. This builds upon other core sectoral policy documents related to tourism, such as Tourism Policy 1995-2000 and the Responsible Tourism Policy of 2005. A lot of time has elapsed, and there is a need to revise the old tourism policy, Responsible for Tourism Policy, Tourism, Culture, and Hospitality Strategy, in order to provide the Tourism and Culture Ministry with an updated policy framework and strategy for the sustainable development of the industry, and to realign tourism with overall goals and objectives of the new government blueprint, National Development Plan. It is also an opportunity to render coherent at all the ad hoc and diverse initiatives in the sector. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, this is why government is in this context has set out to assess effectiveness and scope of the old national tourism policy within the context of the present national development goals and challenges, address major industry trends, critical industry needs, key recommendations from sector policy, and innovative opportunities for a strengthened national tourism governance, investment, and development model, and to draft and update national tourism policy. We aim to have a comprehensive revise and updating of the national tourism policy of the Gambia, which is deemed to obsolete, in order to strengthen the national policy framework for tourism to more effectively address the current gaps and future development and investment needs, manage critically development constraints, integrate economic, social, environmental, cultural governance, and legislative priorities for the sector, as well as respond to projected performance trends for tourism in the Gambia. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the launching of the formulation of the new national tourism policy and strategy for the Gambia is therefore an important platform for our engagement with the industry to see how we can continue to chart the future of tourism sector in the Gambia. One of the key goals of this process is to actively encourage investment in infrastructure and tourism market development to enhance tourism opportunities and encourage associated development across the country. In this regard, we urge you all government sectors, private sector, civil society, investors, small-scale tourism operators, partners, to actively engage in this process and strengthen ownership of the new policy framework and strategy. As you will note from the presentation of this process, this will be an inclusive process. No one will be left behind. We value the views and contribution of all stakeholders. There is scope for us to see the potential participate in and positive ourselves well within the spectrum of opportunities that are available in tourism, as well all the other sectors of the Gambian economy. These potentials are driven by elements of economic growth, connectivity, the openness of our markets, and greater linkages, as well as responsible and sustainable tourism product development and marketing. Looking ahead, we know there are concerns, fluctuations in global economic, in global economy and trade, global financial crisis, global pandemics, negative travel advices caused by the unsafe political atmosphere, the Ebola, and now COVID-19 pandemics, and most recently our concern that we are losing a competitive edge. Notwithstanding this, it is important that we set a clear vision for tourism in the Gambia and identify measures to attain that vision. A revised national tourism policy and strategy is the right instrument for this. The message in all of this is that we in the Gambia and in the tourism industry in particular are resilient. But the resilience must be underpinned by coordinated action, strategic thinking, cooperation on the ground. As such, this is where we need to focus our work, especially in terms of responsible tourism development and its sustainability. It is therefore imperative that we reinvent our tourism product and perhaps also some of the development process in order to achieve new value propositions. Let me again say one important thing that we have also managed as a government. We have managed to encourage the industry to be in the control of Gambians. And I think we must accept that because of government policy, Gambians have taken a lot of ownership of the industry in the recent past. And therefore, it is important that the views of those that are in this sector are taken on board by government in driving some of our policies, because they have a stake, not only as Gambians, but they have a stake because they own property, they have invested money, they have taken risk, some of them have contracted loans. It is therefore important that government also listen to what they want and how they want it done, so that we will collaborate and cooperate between government issue of owners flying in, going back. It is owners staying and living together with us. And that's why we believe this forum is an opportunity for us to hear from you. And then we have a policy that we will all take ownership of. At the end of the day, we will try to promote it and make sure that it becomes our common success story at the end of the day. That's one of the main concerns of government this time around. We've been criticized by, of course, those who feel that Gambians are taking ownership of the industry. We've been abused and all of it. But we believe that once you take ownership, you become responsible of that product. And I think that's why I believe that every support must be extended to Gambians. But in this process, there will be those Gambians who felt that they were the untouchables. They were the ones who believed they should be the kingmakers of everything. That trend has changed. Every Gambian must be treated honestly, fairly, justly, and sincerely. And I think that's a policy that we must accept, that we are all equal before the law. And our treatment, we all expect to be treated fairly. And it will not be sometimes 100% that every Gambian takes it. It cannot be business as usual all the time. We must expect some challenges as we also drive that policy. But 5 years down the line, I think we will come to realize that we have done 10 years down the line that we've done the right thing. When we all believe we own it together and we are all equal before it, I think it will be our common interest to make sure we preserve it. Whether government or no government, it will be our interest, all of us, to make sure we preserve and protect this industry. In conclusion, looking at trends in tourism development in the Gambia, the prospects are very strong. However, there is a need to focus in our efforts, targets the right market segment, and position ourselves well. We will definitely come across significant or small challenges, but we will be able to achieve significant success going forward. Through the participation of all stakeholders and players in the tourism sector, I pray for Allah's guidance as you embark on this noble and challenging mission, on the service of our beloved country. One more before I conclude. Our marketing strategy has to change. We cannot depend on tour operators filling our hotels, determining the price for us. We cannot continue to do that. That's why you see many hotels, even when they are fully booked, 2 years down the line, refurbishment becomes a problem. The right price is not there. And this is because the policy, the marketing strategy is not in our hands. And we must rethink how we promote our product on our own so that we determine the price. And that cannot happen if we don't want to invest in marketing, both in terms of training. And that's why we are calling on the institutions that are involved in training. We need to support them more so that they can give us the quality product of staff, quality people that we need to make sure that the industry grow high. No matter what investment you may invest, if the personnel, the human resource base is not there, there is no way you can compete effectively internationally. So our key element here is training, effective quality training. And then, of course, our standard services become priority value for money. That is important. And that's why we will do whatever it takes to support all the institutions that are engaged in the training process to make sure we get the quality people that we need to determine our prices. When I was discussing with somebody the last time, how do you fix the cost of a room? Most hoteliers don't even know that anytime you flush a toilet, 10 liters of water is gone. They have no idea. They don't even know how to cost a room. If you want to cost a room, some of them don't even know the cost of water. So if you don't know the cost that you are selling, somebody comes and imposes a price on you. At the end of the day, you find yourself, you are at ground zero. Because no matter what is paid to you, you end up paying everything on expenses. And that's why it is important for us to know the product that we are dealing with. And we can only know when we are made to know by learning about it. And indeed, diversify our marketing strategy. The Ministry of Tourism will work with all of you, for that matter, all of you in both tourism and culture, for us to move down to the West African market. Government will work on a massive marketing delegation, probably to be headed by the highest authority in the country, for all of us to go and market the Gambia in Nigeria and in the sub-region, so that we can attract high-class tourists, paying tourists who will come and stay in the Gambia and enjoy this country. They make millions of holidays outside. But it's easier coming to Gambia when we are prepared to bring them here. We have a few issues on that. Again, training comes in. The food culture is important. How do we train our people to cook for a Ghanaian, a Nigerian, a Togolese, somebody else, so that when they come here, they know that they are coming to their own country to enjoy the same food they left at home. Our biggest challenge towards this, we do not have the markets, the shopping malls, the beautiful shopping plaza for these Nigerians to come and buy gold, jewelry for their children, for their wives, girlfriends, and the rest of it. We don't have it in the Gambia. And we need the massive shopping malls in this country if we want to attract them. Because holidays are determined by two people. The wife, the children determine the holiday of anybody. Or your girlfriend, they determine your holiday. If they know they are going to a country where they will not get gold, where they will not get the big brands, they will not recommend the Gambia. And for us to do that as a country now, we need to go out there and sell the Gambia, all of us. This is not about government alone. We are talking about all of us. To go there and market our country, even if it's going to take us whatever the amount of money would be, we are trying to see how government can raise this money. We go and sell our country, come back. But what do we do in the short term? We don't have the markets. We need a joint venture with Senegal. They have all the boutiques, all the shops, but that's not in the long-term interest of the Gambia. The long-term interest in the Gambia, we must encourage investors to build us the massive shopping malls that you have in other countries. Even if we can get 2, 3, it makes a difference for the Gambia. But we cannot be sitting here, letting top operators run our industry, determining our prices, and yet still we believe that we can make our balance sheet continue to be blue. It cannot be. Because every 5 years in tropical Africa, you need to reinvest in your furniture, in all your rooms, every 5 years because of the heat. And if you want to do that and you are not making the money, it ends up being a problem. So on that note, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to take this opportunity once again to thank you for coming. It shows you have an interest of this industry, and you are most welcome. We are in an open atmosphere. I think we'll avail ourselves to answer questions, and we interact. And this is just the starting point of this policy team. The study will ongo, and then once we are ready with the study, we come back here to validate the policy, and of course, then will be sent to government for final approval. Thank you very much.
Vendors from the class market, they are debated and summarize that the money account is because someone will put it down in my bank. It's very important. As no money made the night said, Nathaniel, Catherine, what you were paying them come. What you also you know what we parce que les tourisme là parce que am na ñoo xam ne li mu ñaangale waaye am nañ ite lool tourisme te ñu ngi def seen alal tourism. Now may I call upon the consultant, Dr. Tijan Jallo, to give us an insight of this process. Dr. Tijan, you are.
To just add my voice to the honorable ministers and the permanent secretary in welcoming you here, and also expressing how delighted we are to see the turnout that has come to this lunch meeting. It has been a late start, but I think from the opening remarks and the welcome remarks, we have a lot of food for thought that has been shared. And I wish that we continue in that process throughout the sessions. I also want to use the opportunity to thank the Ministry and the Minister of Finance, Minister of Tourism and Finance, for giving us the responsibility to carry out this very challenging task. It's a very complex sector, but I think that given the interest and the role of the sector in our economy, we'll try and do our best. We are a team which is tasked with doing this work. We just believe in the process. I have currently Madam Fatu B.I. Raju, who has joined us, and also Lamin Saho. We have an M&E specialist so that they can help us in developing performance indicators which we can all monitor. So the M&E expert will be joining us. We'll have also air access expert who will help us think through in terms of how we can broaden air access to the Gambia, and we'll also have a new marketing strategy platform to join us, and others as well as we go along. So we hope with this team we'll be able to meet the expectations of the ministry and the stakeholders in devising a strategy, a policy and a strategy which will reposition the country's tourism sector the way we all can benefit from. This morning, I just want to give you an overview of what our thinking is in terms of how we'll go about it. I'll make the first presentation, and then my colleague Fatu will come in with a complementary presentation. I'll focus on the methodology, and she will focus more on the mapping of the stakeholders that we want to talk with, have conversations with, the types of site visits we want to carry out. And we would be very interested to know from you whether we have been comprehensive in terms of targeting the stakeholders that have a stake in the tourism sector, so that, as the Honorable Minister has mentioned, nobody will be left behind. So Madam Fatu B.I. will present what we've managed to identify so far. I'm glad also to hear from the Minister that he is talking about tourism and culture. I think that should satisfy some stakeholders who may feel that culture is left out. I had conversations in the corridor with some colleagues on that matter, so I think they are now reassured that it will be inclusive of culture as well. So let me go through very briefly how we are approaching the work. First, I just want to recap on what the objectives, the scope, and the deliverables for this study is, as per the terms of reference, so that we all understand what is it that we have been asked to do. I think one of the things that we'll do very early on is to share the QORs with everybody, as well as our inception report, so that every stakeholder knows exactly what is it that we are setting out to do. The second part of my presentation will be the method of some of the apex institutions that are going to be driving this policy, so that we understand whether they are fit for purpose. Can they do the job to deliver the strategy and the policy, the new orientations that will emerge? If not, what should government sector is extremely vulnerable to political, social, economic, and pandemic impacts. And unless we, together with the stakeholders, think through as to what those risks are and what possible mitigation strategies government and stakeholders can put in place, we'll be lurching from crisis to crisis. I think over the last 10 years, we've had 3 or 4 different crises that have hit the sector. Every time we think we are going up, something comes out that pulls us back. So we need to begin to think about those risks and analyzing them and knowing that. We'll share with you what the policy and strategy framework would look like, just as a working basis. And we'll share with you also the work plan, what we aim to accomplish when. That's what the presentation will cover. In terms of the objective, we've been tasked to carry out a comprehensive revision and updating of the national tourism policy of the Gambia. And this is in order to strengthen the national policy framework for tourism, to more effectively address current gaps and future development and investment needs. I think the minister has emphasized that. So is to review and update the policy framework in order to strengthen the framework, to make it more effective in addressing gaps for enhanced performance in the sector. So that's what the revision of the policy is supposed to accomplish. Scope of work. We have 3 fundamental tasks to do. First is to make sure that we prepare a comprehensive work plan that is approved by MOTC. We've done that and shared with MOTC and the Ministry of Finance, and they've accepted the work plan. So we are halfway down on that plan. The second is to assess the current national policy framework. And this will include review and analysis of a wide range of sector documents, assessment of national, regional, and global policies and trends, and as well as conversations and discussions and interactions with stakeholders. And at the end of that process of task 2, a comprehensive assessment report will be prepared, and we will also have another meeting so that we see whether that assessment is correct before we move to the next stage of developing the policy and strategy document itself. So we'll have another opportunity to meet before the policy and strategy document is finalized and validated and finalized. And that is when we all come together now and review what have been the findings, what have you said, what is in the documents, what is our own analysis, showing us in terms of the gaps, the challenges, the opportunities, and trends. And finally, the task 3 is to prepare the actual policy and strategy framework for the sector that is inclusive of culture as well. We've talked about that with the PS in terms of the time frame for the policy. I think what is proposed is that the policy has a 10-year framework, but with a start with a strategy which is 5 years, so that you will have two midterm strategies within the policy period. What are they expecting us to deliver? Is the work plan, a comprehensive assessment report, and an updated and revised national tourism policy framework and strategy. So those are the three things that we'll produce, which we'll also discuss with you. As I said, the work plan has already been developed. In terms of the methodology and the process that we are adopting, you have several phases. You have the inception phase, whereby we develop the methodology, and et cetera, et cetera. There are the stakeholder consultations. There is also the visioning and policy strategy design that we have to sit and imagine and rethink with your support on the vision and the policy and strategy. There is the institutional need, capacity needs assessment and risk analysis and mitigation. There is the validation stage, and there is the finalization and submission. This matrix, which I hope is clear to you wherever you are sitting, just outlines what is the objective for each of these phases, what are the outputs that we expect for each phase, and what are the tools that we are going to use to achieve the objective and the outputs. In the inception phase, we use the opportunity to clarify with MOTC so that we have the same understanding of what the assignment eventually is meant to generate, and also to ensure that we understand the expectations well. And we also use it as an opportunity to design the tools to be used in the study. And part of it was a comprehensive search and listing of documents, because we don't want to reinvent anything. So all the strategies, the sector documents, and so on and so forth, we've been consolidating. And here again, we welcome any pointers that the stakeholders think are important documents for us to reference and look through and go through and understand. The stakeholder consultations is to identify the key issues, challenges, and opportunities for the sector from your perspective, so that we hear from you. What do you envision for this sector? What are the issues and the challenges of the sector? We will use that and combine that with our desk review of documents and also trend analysis on where the industry is going. And then, of course, we'll use that as a basis for the comprehensive assessment report that I referred to. The visioning will look at the key elements of the policy and the strategy, and we'll also interact once a draft is out with the ministry and some key stakeholders to make sure that the policy framework being developed is in line with their expectations. And the institutional capacity needs assessment and risk analysis I've already mentioned, and then the validation and final submission. Now, why an institutional capacity assessment? Some people may ask. After all, some of these institutions have been restructured and so on and so forth. But this is our strong belief that once you develop a new policy framework and a new strategy, you need to step back and say, do the key institutions leading the sector have the capacities to deliver on this policy? And that is crucial. In many of our institutions, we develop new strategies, but we don't go back and see, do we have the human capacity? Do we have the organizational capacity? Do we have the policy environment to deliver on this new strategy and policy framework? If you don't do that, then you are setting up yourself for failure, because you cannot task an institution to drive a new policy when it doesn't have the means and the capacities to do that. So we added that as an important part of the work, although it was not requested, but we added that. So the ministry has asked us to target GT Board, GTHI, and the Council for Arts and Culture. Maybe there is an NGO or a collective which is very key in the tourism sector that we may also need to look at to see how best it can help drive the vision. We will be looking at the institutional capacity assessment from 3 levels, which is the human resources, individual. Do the staff and the staff within these institutions have the right experience, skills, and competencies to discharge their mandate, as well as looking at how to implement the new policy. Organizational level, what are the internal policies, arrangements, procedures, and mechanisms for planning, monitoring, and evaluation, financial management within these institutions, so that we look at whether they have the wherewithal to manage the institutions well. And finally, the institutional level, which is looking at the policies and the legislation and the powers that have been conferred on these institutions. Are they positive or negative in terms of them fulfilling their mandates? So the institutional capacity assessment comes after we have developed the policy and strategy framework, so that we answer the question, capacity for what? We don't do it before we know what they are supposed to support. It is not an investigation or fault finding. It is just a way to see how is it that the government and other stakeholders can help the institutions, make them stronger so that they can fulfill their role. So it's a more positive, forward-looking assessment rather than a fault-finding one. And the target institutions, as I said, is GT Board, GHTI, and NACAC in the first place. Risk analysis and mitigation. As I said in the introduction, this is also something that we want to work with the stakeholders so that we can properly analyze the risks that the sector faces, political risk, economic, pandemic, etc. And I think at least if we know what the risks are and begin to imagine mitigation strategies, it will help government and advise government on what measures it needs to put in place to anticipate and also take account of things that may come in the future. So that will be also done by the team. In 10, 15 years, Gambia's tourism, where do you want to see it? And it is this vision which will drive the policy and the strategy. So I think during the National Tourism Action Meeting to really look at that vision element in terms of what type of tourism do we want to see in the Gambia in the future. There is a tourism vision and mission by the MOTC, but I think, as the PS pointed out when we had conversation, this is long obsolete and can no longer act as a guide. In fact, I think nobody, in fact, uses it anymore in terms of a guide to what the sector should do. We also want to identify what should be the foundations for our tourism policy and strategy from the global level, the linkages with the Sustainable Development Goals, the linkage with African Agenda 2063, and the national level. So those constitute foundation pillars for the new. Then we need to define a goal. What do we want to achieve? And the associated targets. What should be the strategic objectives, outcomes, and outputs? And through this, we'll develop a robust M&E and accountability framework that will identify the key players for delivering each outcome and output, and also the targets that we want to achieve. So broadly, this is what our policy and strategy will cover. What is our work plan. We have tentatively developed the inception phase, stakeholders identified, inception report and process launch started around 15th of December and culminating today. The stakeholder consultations, we were hoping when we started by 28th of February, end of this month, but I think it's going to obviously slide into March because of the late start. So we want to take a month to do those consultations and visits to upcountry. It may take a bit longer. We want to then do the capacity assessment and risk analysis report by end of March. And then the draft should be out in April. And we are hoping that validation and finalization will be by end of May 2021. So that's the timeline that we have given ourselves, plus or minus a few weeks, given the fact that sometimes things slide. So that is the end of my presentation. And when we started thinking about how to do it, it occurred to us that a good starting point is to bring all the stakeholders together so that we can inform you and let you know that this is ongoing and this is how we want to approach it. Solicit your help, your assistance, because really the policy and strategy belong to you and government. So for you to take ownership of it and be aware of what is going on and get ready to interact and dialogue with the team as we go around talking to different stakeholders and so forth. So I will now invite my colleague Fatou Biaye to give you an overview of the listing of the stakeholders at the site visits that we want, and then we'll be open to any questions or clarifications or any contribution that you want to make at this stage, even if it is giving us ideas on what the policy should address. They are all welcome. But this is just to prepare you for the larger task that we have ahead in dialoguing with all the stakeholders. Thank you very much.
I have seen that this is something that I have wanted to do for a long time, working and developing something for the Gambia. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. My presentation is going to be about the stakeholder mapping that we have done. We all know that we don't do work. Okay, I forgot about that. We all know that you can't do any planning without involving the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the most important people in any activity that you do, because this is what you are doing is going to affect them, and it's also going to affect your project, whether it's positive or negative. So stakeholders are very important. That's why we consider project, and so we are starting with that. The contents of the presentation will be the rationale for having a stakeholder mapping, and also we will also look at the methodology that we use when we are trying to map the stakeholders. We also have a slide on the tourism stakeholders. We have done a representative of some of the stakeholders. Not all of them are shown in the presentation. So if you don't see your name on the presentation, that doesn't mean that you have not been taken care of. But it's also, we'll also appreciate it if you come up with new ideas. If you think you are not you are not seeing yourself in this document, please come forward and talk to us. And also, we have proposed to visit sites. You don't do armchair planning. You have to go to the site to know what you're doing and to actually see what you're doing on the ground. because it's very important. You might think that something is happening when it is not on the ground. So it's important for us to go and do those site visits, to visit the stakeholders, talk to the stakeholders, engage them, but also go to the sites, the attractions that are available in this country, because they are all included in our planning process. And also, finally, we want to look at the conclusion. Now, for the stakeholder mapping, like I said, it's imperative that we have a stakeholder map so as to involve the right people when launching such a major project or product like this one. And stakeholder mapping will allow us to identify key stakeholders that will influence our project and its success. Thus, we will find out who has the most influence, focus on those who benefit most, and also see where resources are most plentiful, but also overall have a game plan. It's important to have a plan of whatever you are doing so that you will understand how to monitor all the work that you are doing. So the methodology that we use is the stakeholder, for the stakeholder mapping is to do, first of all, a brainstorming. A brainstorming, we actually have all of us coming up with all the stakeholders that we can think of. But of course, this is not exhaustive, like I said. If we want to do, if you think that you have not seen yourself in this, please come forward. Then we have all those stakeholders. After the brainstorming, we have all the stakeholders categorized into groups. You have the transportation group, you have the services group, you have the agricultural linkages group, people who providers and providers of services and products. Then we prioritize them into the key stakeholders and the important stakeholders. So we also did a stakeholder communication in which we tried to find out how we are going to communicate with our stakeholders. How do we communicate? Since we are grouping them in categories, we definitely don't communicate with them at the same level. There has to be a difference in the way we communicate with all the other stakeholders, because they have different needs and different priorities. Then the tools for stakeholder consultation. We used key informant interviews. We had focus group discussions. We have online interactions where face-to-face contact is restricted. For example, during the COVID-19 period, it was very difficult for us to have a face-to-face contact all the time. So we thought it would be important to at least have other means of communicating with our stakeholders by using other means and other mechanisms. For example, the meeting today is one of the methods for stakeholder consultation, one of the methods that we are using to consult with the stakeholders. And who are these stakeholders? We have prepared a general list of the stakeholders, a comprehensive list. Like I said before, it is not exhaustive. If we feel that if you have any ideas of other stakeholders that we might have left behind, please inform us so that we can include them. Because we all know that tourism is such a cross-cutting sector. Its stakeholders are actually, we cannot really exhaust them, but we will try our best to get all of what we think is available with us in this country. And Doctor, can I go back? I wanted to show them the list of the stakeholders. It should be in my slide. So I have a representative sample of stakeholders in the tourism sector. Of course, the MOTC and its satellite institutions are key stakeholders. They are the stakeholders, the first batch of stakeholders that we have interacted with. But we also have other stakeholders like the Hotel Association, civil society, and all the relevant associations, the private sector and the investors, our development partners, as well as all the other partners that are in the tourism sector. We also propose to visit those sites and attractions. And we believe that visiting them will be important because this is what we are going to do. That's where we are going to do the work, the implementation. So we need to be in the same level with the stakeholders on the ground, because if they don't accept these proposals, the project is bound to fail. So we are hoping that with the visiting of the sites and the people and the stakeholders on the ground, this will help us indeed in the success of the project. In conclusion, we just want to say that through this stakeholder consultation, the consultant and the group, the team, are now empowering all the stakeholders to take ownership of this revised policy and strategy. The Minister of Tourism and Culture and aligned institutions and the consultant will recommend the strong support of the stakeholders and players during all the phases of the assignment. So we are imploring all the stakeholders that are out there within the Greater Banjul area as well as countrywide to support this project by taking ownership of it, so that we can have a better policy document and policy and strategy document. Thank you for your kind attention. But I want to show you the list of the stakeholders. A list of the stakeholders. It's in the yes, the proposed list. Yes, thank you. Go out. You are also the regional and local communities who, like I said, are the most important stakeholders, because the success of this project and the success of the assignment is impinging on them, because with them accepting it, we will be able to have a good policy, airlines, attractions, travel bloggers, ASAT, formerly ASET, ecotourism societies, tourist guides, bird watchers, fruit sellers, juice pressers, craft vendors. All of them are included in the tourism organizations and operators, whether you are formal or informal. You are all included in this list. Of course, we cannot put all of them in this list here because we will just continue like that. But all the same, please give us your information if you think you are not in this, you are not included here. And then we have our development partners, UNDP, UNEP, African Development Bank, World Bank, Standing Committee for Economic and Commercial Cooperation of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, COMSEC. We have also the Banking Association and also the Select Committee, the Select Commercial Banks, and of course the GCCI. These are our development partners. Okay, thank you.
We have a
yes, it's there. Yes, it's there. It's in the government institutions. It's at the top. Yeah, yeah. Wait. We had it. I'm sure it's not in this presentation. Yeah.
I think we need to really
yes. Yes, yes, yes.
The law is
come for them, and investors are finding it difficult to really put the money in the river transport.
Yeah, I think.
And that must be, I think that they need so that the law can be arranged.
Sector, which is ground handlers, equipment hirers, such as TTAG, tour operators, category A and B, vehicle renters, public bus services, boat owners at Denton Bridge, tourist taxi, Gambia International Airlines.
Somebody wants
to Sahwa is taking note of what you are saying. Okay. Assistant. Mr. Saho is actually taking note of all the issues that are being raised. So, Saho, I think you will include the Gambia Ports Authority. Just to double, it's there. Okay. It's there. It's there. It's here, GPA. I got it. Okay. So, for small and medium enterprises, we have the hotels, the restaurants, beach bars, dry cleaners, waste removal companies, Kotu sewage plant, backwater dump site, and other countrywide small businesses, Yaboy Home Cooking, TTAG, and GHA. And these are very important stakeholders because you will see we have included the backwater dump site and the sewage plant. This is because tourists are not restricted only in the tourism development area. They do go out in town, in the market, in our places, the local areas, and the local restaurants. So we need to collaborate with the management of those areas, particularly the municipal councils, so that we will be able to secure a clean environment. And we have also the NGOs, charities or non-profit organizations, travel foundations, tourism societies. We are also looking at tourists and visitors. In our interactions, we want to also know the views of the tourists and any other visitor that is coming to this country, because it's them that we are trying to serve. So we need to understand what they want and how they want it so that we'll be able to achieve our goal. But of course, we are not forgetting the ethnic tourists. These are the Gambians in the diaspora who are always coming here at a specific period. We have gotten some inputs from the team to include the Gambians in the diaspora. So we will put it in this list. It's not here, but eventually we will have the ethnic tourists included in our list. Then we have the utilities and infrastructure. We have NAWEC, National Roads Authority, GAMWORKS, Gambia Maritime Authority. We have the Gambia Ports Authority. We have Gambia Civil Aviation and the Bus Corporation. All of these are institutions that have a role to play in the success of any tourist industry. That, I think we did something. Yes, we have all the service. Huh? Yes, we had it. Huh? Yeah, let's see. Yeah.
What you want to drive? Because none of the major complaints we receive is some of them when they come to the border. Checkpoint, the number of checkpoints that they go through. The ambassadors of the that you address. We have to have a laissez-passer to be given from the point of entry that they will use. Nobody will ask them where they can put the laissez-passer. They have too much movement in the country without too many checkpoints and the rest of it. And again, I also believe that young Gambians, their friends, We know that Gambians are moving out of country
here.
to form some sort of a transport company. They don't have the funds, but if we can support them to own one or two vans, air conditioned, that they can pick Gambians from their houses, take them to on a holiday, come back and bring them to make it easier. I think these are all the things that we are thinking of. And seeing how best we can collaborate with the bank to have a brand, particularly tourist taxi, that we should be able to roll it out gradually, and then you pay the type of tourist taxis that we have. I think these are all things that to come up and to see how best we can get the finances to support them and work with the bank. And have a particular model tourist taxi that is meant for the Gambia.
Yeah. Okay. GRPS, QTV, all the social media, print and press, West Coast Radio, online media platforms like Fatos Network, Kerfato, Paradise TV, Star TV, Africa Eye. All of them are included in the stakeholders list. And we are also going to look at the training establishments. Of course, GTHI is #1 on our list, plus MDI, ITalk, GTTI, UTG, now, yep, Techifi projects. We are going to include all of these in and even more in our list of stakeholders. We also think that the tourism task workforce, that is the labor force within the tourism sector, should also be considered as stakeholders, because these are people that work in the industry. And if we are talking of improving the facilities, we should also consider improving the services. Yes. Yes.
I think it is also important to assess the training institutions. They are, the policy they are using, what kind of training are they giving? Does it match the standards that they are looking for? Because they don't also be producing substandard people that cannot contribute much to the type of tourism that we want to develop, the industry we want to develop. I think assessing this in this institution, whether it's going to be in collaboration with the National Training Authority, not how we're going to do this, but I would expect that we have them classified and we know how we are going to deal with it, because it's important for us. Because government cannot also invest in money to training that they are not delivering the standard service that you want them to deliver. So you assessing this institution based on their syllabus, the type of training they are rendering, and giving us the overview of those institutions will help us formulate policies how we deal with it. I think that's important as far as we are concerned as a government.
Okay. And tourism-related entrepreneurs like Lamin Women's Garden, Vegetable Garden, Sukuta Vegetable Garden, Pelican Fish Processing Plant, Bapote Fish Market, and Ice Plant, the Butchers, the Maroons, the St. Mary's Food and Wine, the Radville Farms, and of course the Gambia Craft Market Federation and Gambia Hotel Association.
I think I can have something to add.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Congratulations, Honorable Minister. This is a timely strategy. I just wanted to add, there's a very interesting program on the Songhai in Chennai,
Yes.
agricultural skill training for youth, and they produce a lot of things, and they have it can even be a place for ecotourism invest, because they have a huge land, and we know that the landscape is very propice for this type of activities, not only for foreigners, but even for Gambians to really see, better know the country. And especially for the youth, because many have been trained there, they are joined the private sector, they are producing agricultural products that are already available in the market. So I think it will be a good opportunity to use that and to scale up what happens as investment by the government to the Ministry of Youth and together with the Ministry of Agriculture. Thank you.
The list is very long, a lot of stakeholders. So we will not be going individual by individual. We will be doing focus group discussions in some certain categories so that we bring together like-minded or similar stakeholders and have a dialogue with them over a few hours to get their views. Because we will not be going to every single one one-on-one, but some of the key ones. I think one thing that may be missing in our list, which the minister highlighted in his statement, I think we need to have a dialogue with Gambian investors in the industry. What are their constraints? What are their perspectives? What do they want government to do to encourage more of that type of investment? I think we add that so that we have a special session with local investors in the sector and have a dialogue with them and listen to the views and what they want to say. So we'll add that as well.
One more point that I think we need to also take into account is the customer aspect of the job. Because promoting new dishes, Gambians are going for another place, and maintaining our cultural food culture also matters a lot. I think we've seen a lot of type of food that we are eating that puts effect to our country. And I think our food experts will be able to develop more skills
Small
to
enterprises.
the regional tourism we are talking about. If you can look at our system, we can only cater to Senegal because we have common dishes together. But outside that, most of the times when you go as a Cameroonian or Nigerian, Ghanaian, you want a certain dish or Togolese, you may not have them on the spot. They have to go and outsource it somewhere. I think training in terms of gastronomy, in trying to also anticipate for our efforts in regional tourism, makes a big difference. We need to think about that too, so that you can also come on holiday and not feeling that they are leaving their home, but once they come, they are coming to their country to enjoy the kind of food that they left home. I think it's a training aspect of it. I think the DHI is already engaged in trying to work out to creating new business, how we can work with the self association so that we can create, innovate new type of business that will attract even Gambians to really pay for it, so that people have the culture of eating different dishes when they are of country or when people come to visit our country. That's also very important.
I think we pause here just to get now reaction from the audience and the stakeholders in terms of anything left out before we proceed.
Thank you. Ligi but I'm not sure whether there is time. Yes, we need to hear them. Let's see the mics.
We make use of technology, particularly when it comes to promotion of the destination. Thank you.
I would like to commend the Ministry of Tourism and Culture under the wise leadership of the Honorable Minister for coming up with this initiative. I think it is very timely, and we cannot find a better time to come up with a review of the strategy and policy for tourism development than this critical and material moment in preparation for post-COVID. During the opening remarks of the Honorable Minister, he made mention and raised concern about the quality of services to be delivered in our hospitality sector. I think this is very key, and the GTHI has a very important role to play in this. I think these are also key issues, putting into consideration the situation that we found ourselves during the COVID, and it has become eminently clear to everybody here now that domestic tourism is a force to reckon with. It's a substitute for international tourism, and I think we stand a good chance. We have a good opportunity to promote this sector, to be able to find a way out. In line with that, the GTHI, in collaboration with YEP in the TechIFI program, had started to extend the training programs in other parts of the country. We have piloted a training program last year and the year before in Janjambure and in Farafenni. We're looking forward to doing the same in the West Coast region and also the Upper River region. We'll do justice to this strategy and policy that is coming up. But just to highlight some of these issues that had been raised by the Honorable Minister for consideration of some of these issues that are also very relevant to the development of tourism. I must say at this moment that one of the best things that happened to us as a country is to have a hotel school way back in 1981, at a time when no country in the sub-region had thought of the need to have a training institute. And that is why, with the transformation of the hotel school into the Tourism and Hospitality Institute, had made the Gambia to stand out in human resource development and capacity building of the sector. And I think this should be a priority, and it should continue to be a priority for the country and for sustainability. I thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Momodu Diwa, Director of Policy Analysis Unit under the Department of Strategic Policy and Delivery at the Office of the President. Let me begin by joining the other speakers to commend the Honorable Minister and the Minister of Tourism in general for this initiative. A new tourism policy is long overdue in view of tourism's contribution to this economy. However, I have a comment or an observation on the presentation by the consultant. Naturally, coming from the Policy Analysis Unit, one of our fundamental tasks is to work with sectors to ensure that sector policies are complementary, they are aligned to each other. So as a result, in my view, I observed that in the institutional assessment, only institutions under the Ministry of Tourism were listed. But if you look at the tourism, you would agree with me that they have to move, tourists have to move. So I am of the view that this policy, this new policy, must be aligned with the transport policy of the Ministry of Transport. And as a result, we need also to include the GCAA or airport operations and the GIA in the institutional assessments that the consultants will do. It is extremely important that the policy is aligned with their plan, because if you have a grand policy and the policy at the level of the Ministry of Transport is not moving along with the tourism policy, it will be difficult to implement. So I believe they are in the consultations, but I also think in terms of the institutional assessments, these institutions need to look at, because they carry the tourists. Thank you. That's my comment.
An air access consultant who they would be working with closely, which would cover most of the expectations of civil aviation in terms of air access for tourism in bringing in those tourists from various destinations. In terms of coordination of policies of other sectors, I think what we're trying to do here is to, as much as possible, align and upgrade our current situation, policy initiative that we're trying to achieve, to ensure that it is not obsolete when it is linking with other sectors that have already upgraded theirs. Some, of course, have not upgraded their policies too, but it might be too much of a colossal task in trying to, revisit all of those other agency policies in probably consultation with our own policy as it stands. It might be a broad scope of work, but I think it is very, very clear in the deliverables that we have shared with you the need to work closely with civil aviation, GIA, and I think fundamentally having an air access consultant will assist us in as much as possible in achieving that task. And yes, we have taken that very much into account. Thank you.
We are also looking at the backward and forward linkages with the other sectors. agriculture, for example, the linkages between agriculture and the tourism sector. So that is part of the work that we're doing. That will bring about greater policy coherence. But I think doing the capacity assessment beyond these things would be very difficult because where do you draw the line? Otherwise, you just focus on capacity assessment to do the entire period. What I want to draw your attention to is that after the NDP was adopted, the African Capacity Building Foundation supported a comprehensive capacity assessment for key ministries and other agencies. And if my memory serves me, I think some of these institutions were, I think we take note of what you're saying, but broadly it beyond the key ethics institutions, we think the time that we're giving is very difficult.
Good morning. My name is Chef International. So having to engage the chef associations in coming up with recipe guidelines and also development of recipes to suit both within and those coming in to enjoy what we have. Yes, we have an institution or institutions around training chefs, but their training is also limited to certain categories. Once they've now been trained and graduated, they land in our hands as chefs to be coordinated by us, the Chef Association. And if there is any organization that is in need of skillful chefs who are trained, qualified, and also experienced, they will have to come to the Chef Association because that's where the pool of those trained chefs are. GTHI doing very well, and other, well, I'll count on GTHI most because the training structure that I've seen on there actually suits what we actually look up to. So GTHI, as much as they do, once their products are graduated, they will have to learn to do chef associations. So we would like to recommend strongly that the chef associations or the association of the chefs in the Gambia is engaged in having to help boost this food tourism in our country.
Because right now they're graduating about 25 cents a year, and that disappears in thin air. Most of them are employed by the cruise liners. Once they are graduated, they disappear. And the attrition rate in your sector is very high. Most chefs get international appointment. And that's where also I feel as a government, we are failing. Because we should have a standard contract that will protect those Gambians who are being hired in terms of their wages, their security, their insurance, so that we can track to know where these Gambians are, their safety. That is an element I believe as a government, we are working on it now with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, new Trade Minister, the Minister of Tourism, how we can certainly have a standard system of people wanting to come and hire our people, particularly in this area. Today, if I want to have a chef, the minimum salary they ask for is $15,000 for a home of a family of less than 10 people. And you can hardly even get one. And that's why I believe the 5 training institutes we have in the Gambia, we need to revisit them. See the problem why they cannot graduate more. We already have that of the GTHI. I think, if I'm right, permanent sector is about $30 million requirement for them to be able to graduate more chefs with all the equipment that are needed. What is the next other institution? What do they need? Do they have, if we give them the resources, do they have the capacity? And that's why I felt that the studies to look at those other institutions, evaluate them, see what are the requirements, what is the need, what do they need for them to be able to also, because GTHI is too small for the demand of chefs in the Gambia. Too small, 25. And how many hotels have just opened or were about to open because of COVID, they closed down. If they were all to open up, considering number of all the chefs who have been hired overseas, you will end up having no cooks in this country. So this is a serious gap that I think your association has to work to support other institutions who are also in the training industry within the tourism sector. Because as you said, food tourism is important. I know people who make holiday decisions, they will not go to current countries because the food, they don't like the flavor. And they would rather go to another country where they feel that they will enjoy the food. And that is important, just to buttress your point. But I think the assessment that they have conducted, there are 5 institutions that we've looked at the level of the ministry. That are, only one is government, the rest are all privately owned. But they are all serving the Gambian people and speaking the Gambia. We need to look at them, how many of them we can bring to standard, how many we cannot, what can we do, what is the amount of resources needed to support them to graduate at least 50 or 100 chefs a year. That would suit the demand for not only hotels, but Gambians. Because most of our working mothers have a problem. They have to take care of the kids at home. They have to go to work. They have to come back, prepare the food. It is not possible. They are human beings. So, but then if you have a chef that both can contribute to help maintain, take care of that aspect, they will sacrifice and do it. But they cannot get it. They don't have the qualified people around. You need them, you don't find them. And then we cannot even know where these people are. I'll give you a story. We went to a hotel in Dubai with the president. And we were invited to a lunch by the emir, and we sat down. They brought us the menu. I saw chicken yassa. I saw benefit. I saw Damoda. I looked at the face. I said to the president, I'm surprised there is a Gambian in this restaurant. All of a sudden, myself, Mr. Noor, came out standing in front of us. The Gambian was a chef, was myself. He said, I'm the chief cook of this restaurant. We are amazed, cooking for the emirate of Dubai. But we didn't even have an idea that the restaurant we are going to eat was a Gambian non-chef restaurant. Because we are not keeping track of even our citizens where they are working, what they are doing. They are not safe, they are not secure. I mean, they can just come here, when they come to recruit, these crews that come to recruit, nobody knows about it. They just go and meet somewhere and meet 1 or 2 people, get them, they interview them, and they put them on the next flight they are gone. No security for them. Unlike other countries like Bangladesh, like other countries, India, many other developing countries. They have a program, they have a standard, they have a contract that you sign, their remittances, their security, their insurance, everything. I think we need to do a lot more work beyond government institutions. Thank you.
Gambia. I have noticed actually when the consultants mentioned, though the Honorable Minister did mention that it's tourism and culture, but throughout the whole process, I've now really confirmed that it's the tourism policy and that the cultural aspect of it might reflect, but it is not evident. But I went through a little bit of research and noticed that there is an arts and culture policy already that was developed in 2018. Yes, that is a 10-year policy. We all know that tourism and culture go hand in glove. So I'm now wondering whether the consultants will take into consideration that they can't dissociate in their efforts to develop a strategy in implementing a tourism policy without a reflection of the cultural aspect of that tourism policy. So I'm just raising it. I wanted to say a few things, if you will notice, if you can note. And then the second thing is, I've gone through the compendium of civil government policies, and I've noticed, I'm sure this came after the NDP, that many sectors started developing their policies and strategies in 2018, either for 5 years or for 10 years. And I'm surprised that the one representing the Directorate of policy and listen is asking how you will mainstream the tourism and the transport policies. I think it is their job. And I think they have to really brace up to that. The problem is we have so many policies on the different departments. They are supposed to all point up to the NDP, and yet there is no intersectorial, interministerial coordination, which is actually their responsibility. So maybe it's a message that he should carry to the Director General. So it is important and it's indispensable for effective use of resources, for avoidance of duplicity, that they work hard to ensure policies that are being developed, they involve themselves, they review them to see that there is what we call a harmonization of policies that meet up one ultimate objective, that is the vision of the nation. And if that is not done, what naturally every district will have its own policy and probably will even be conducting activities that are similar to the others, and that is waste of resources. And that's my view, and I'm hoping that they would brace up to it. So thinking about tourism, naturally there is agriculture into it, there's transport into it, there's education into it, there's a host of things into it. So they must be at their level now organizing the intersectorial or interministerial policy review, as often as possible, to be looking at those areas and help to better coordinate the use of resources and also how they can support each other. Now, I also noticed that there is an element that is new in this country that we are probably not taking into consideration, and that one I represent it as well, but not officially here. We have the National Human Rights Commission. Human rights is an element today that shouldn't be neglected, especially when we are developing our policies and strategies, especially in most of the sectoral areas, tourism especially, because we know human rights and tourism can go together, hand in glove. We know a lot of human rights abuses that can take place within the tourism sector. But how would you reflect that now in the policy and strategy to ensure that there is a way that the human rights abuses are addressed and handled, depending on the category of their seriousness? So I mean, I think this could be also one element that should not be forgotten and taken into consideration. And education is important. We're talking about harmonizing the institutions, correlating them, but harmonization of curricula also is important, because that would help even the progression. Like somebody who leaves ITTOG and wants to go to GTHI, how would that person progress without having to repeat a whole program? How would the curricula across these institutions in the same area and go to another institution and do an advanced diploma or even a degree? So I think this is important for consideration. That way, we can strengthen and even diversify some of the other programs in tourism. Now, tourism education also should be considered at a much lower level, basic and secondary. It is negligible because sometimes we talk about social and environmental studies, and that's where they put in tourism just for them to discover that there are stone circles and etc. But there's more to it than just discovering the stone circles. That's historic. What about the other aspects of tourism that they need to know? So I think if we give the streamline that tourism education across, in collaboration with Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, it can help children to be aware and conscious of what a tourist is. What is the relevance of having tourists in this country? Because we are making this country a hub for tourism. So they must be involved, they must be aware. So that tomorrow it makes it easy in their advanced studies or interactions or even in specializations to better understand the tourism sector. And I think that is indispensable. And the Honorable Minister, because you did invite me as from the writer's perspective, I also have to urge the tourism sector to consider developing material in tourism. There's a lot of material that can be developed and that can be marketed related to tourism. We're talking about our cultures. We can capture our cultures in books. We can capture our culinary gastronomy in books. You know, somebody should come here and understand how to cook domoda or chebujan and go with it. A book that a person can carry. Why not? We should capture our history in a very beautifully designed or presentable way in our books. And then somebody who even gets a book guide should be seen, we should even have a very beautiful guide that is updated regularly on everything tourism. I'm not saying it is not there, but I'm sure if the Writers Association is engaged, we can find a way of collaborating in making sure this happens and can even bring money to the Writers Association. Thank you.
Contact with any tour operator.
that emanates from the EU around, and most other places other than the EU have some human rights clauses, and that you are obligated to respect those clauses. And I would urge you to visit some of the Tabasco or other tour operators, look at their contracts, you will find it there. So human rights, I want to tell you, as you said, is top on the table within the tourism sector, because there has been abuses before, and really we've realized that it's time to really curtail it, stop it somewhere. Unfortunately, this country has been victim. We've been victims of misinformation, misrepresentation by few those who do not understand the danger of what they write. You know, there are our competitors who are fighting us, who are also want to dominate us, because we're all going to the same source market, all of us. And some have money, some have experience, some have both, some really just try to manage. So when we get there, they see how we really put across our messages, they feel threatened. So it's easy to come and pay a journalist somewhere there, come and see somebody here, they make a documentary, Gambia sex tourism, just to destroy the country. It's happening, we know. People who spy on our tax policies, they spy on our program, but they go beyond that. They also go outside, use people, give them money, just to come and, you know, destroy our country. But that's where your role comes in. The Writers Association can really come in defense of our country. They can come in to write good narratives of the Gambia. And I think we've talked about this in the past. That's why we felt coordinating and supporting the media as a ministry was very important during our COVID intervention, because I know what and really it helps, because some of them came to understand some of these stories were unnationalistic, they were bad for our country, and really it's nothing to do with politics, it's to do with destroying a whole country or building a whole country. And I think the media now have reached a level where they have matured to understand that certain articles are only meant to destroy our country, and most of them now stand firm to defend and talk good and write good about our country. And I think that's where your Writers Association should be strongly engaged to support that process, that the narratives of our country become good ones, regardless of who is here. I think for us, that's what is important we need to take into account. But most cases, we are victims. And those who write it, when you engage them one-to-one, they don't even know why they did it. Probably they are paid 200-300 euros. They write a story that destroyed billions in our country. By the time they realize they've done harm, it's too late. And if you want to prosecute them again, it doesn't make any much good. But we engage them when they do it, and we tell them the danger of what they've done. And they realize they are wrong. Because really, I mean, there are things they do, they cannot prove it in any court of law. They just narrate it and write it down. So I think we need to really engage you. And you mentioned about the issue of the gentleman from the policy analysis unit. I have a lot of respect for this gentleman because I know he has a lot of inside knowledge about tourism. I've met him on a couple of times and engaged him. But the problem that we have here, I know where he's coming from. Gambia is one of the few countries where air transport is not within the Ministry of Tourism. And that's where the problem is. All over the sub-region, air transport is always within the Ministry of Tourism because they are so interlinked and connected. If you want to separate them, they will start having this type of problem that we are having with. And we do not want to bring that here. That's not a level for us. I think somebody have that decision somewhere. It's something we inherited and then we found here. But when we travel on missions, we see the differences from our end as a country, going to a meeting where the transport and the tourism sector is represented. Sometimes we even have to get the Ministry of Transport to join us to go. But the policy, you will see there that there is a difference between those who have transport within the tourism sector and those who have transport as an outsider. There is always an open difference in these big meetings. So I think these are some of the things that we need to see how we can coordinate it. And one of the things I observed when I came into government I had a friend, President Ibeka is a personal friend of mine. I remember when I visited him in 2013, we were having lunch and we were discussing, and he told me that he has what we call Minister of Intergovernmental Coordination, a minister who is responsible of coordinating government policy. That's all his job is to coordinate. I said, what's the use of that ministry? You know, I asked him that question. But when I came to government, I saw the relevance of that ministry. Because you spend almost a whole day, every day, 1 hour, trying to get things done through other ministries. But it is not your portfolio, but you just want to see if it is not done by here, something gets stuck there. When that is not done there, somebody's waiting for a document, that document he or she will not receive it. So it brings the whole thing to a standstill. So you spend your time really trying to see what one minister has to get the other one to get do, the other one to get do. So if you have a ministry that is responsible of coordinating this policy, it makes it very easy for any government. Now I'm seeing the use of it. At the time, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I was wondering what should be the use of the Minister of Interministerial Ministry that coordinate the policy of government. So I just want to buy the point that you're talking about. Although we have a small government, but I think the unit, as you said, the policy delivery analysis unit should take up that challenge as a serious challenge. But in most cases, those who have these issues don't have access to them because they are housed at the State House. Access is a problem. They rather come easy access to people like us and others than really attempt to get a lesser passer to enter the State House. So I think these are issues also that we need to take on board. Thank you. So
on the creative arts and so forth, we will incorporate. If you see the formulation of the strategic priority for tourism, it says promoting sustainable and culture-centered tourism. And we crafted that deliberately because of cognizance of the linkages between the culture and the tourism. But we will also thank you for highlighting this new policy on the arts and culture that was adopted. We will consult that and integrate it. So thank you very much for all those very useful comments.
Let me just
Gambian Talents TV, Nunulela Dokuo Seneyata. Gambia Talents TV, Nunulela Dokuo Betiata. Gambia, Nkala Dokuo Betiata. Gambia Talents TV, Nunulela Dokuo Seneyata. Gambia Talents TV, Nunulela Dokuo Betiata. Yeah, Gambia, Nkala Dokuo Seneyata. Yo Gambian Talents TV njalam alnal badi malam nene jeli suso bintele bale jantonko alkal Gambian Talents TV la moy every day and night TV la mi yalla nako mashallah ila diamol kabet yalla la promotional kabet yalla wow ala baraka bake ala baraka fosila koteng